I don't know. Now I can't think of it. It's not mine. What? Two stories. Got a concussion and was unconscious. He was way up. He had a ladder on some scaffolding, which he's very careful about. But when he took the power drill, he had a 4x4 board this long that he's going to put in the garage wall to prevent the wind from blowing something, some lattice work or something from tearing every year. When he put the power drill in, the pressure was so great because it was a 4x4. It was so thick and hard that it threw his hand back, and it caused him to lose his hand. Yeah, he had a severe brain. He should have fallen. He's been I know the name, but I don't know. I'm going to use the table now.
Oh yeah.
Like a whole lot.
Everybody laughs. Hi there, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the AAUW Candidate Forum for the Livingston City Commission. I'm Lisa Harold, and I'm the president of the American Association of University Women, and I'm glad you all are here. Tonight we're going to have a forum with rules, and Lonnie Carton will be our moderator tonight. She'll be reading off the rules, etc. And then after Lonnie gets a chance to read out the rules, then we will start, and we'll have the candidates introduce themselves. So I want to welcome you all, and on behalf of the American Association of University of Women, in addition to talking about the rules, the important thing here is that we'll be collecting questions, and Lonnie will go over that. And we would really appreciate any questions that you have. Now's a great time to ask them of our candidates. So I'm going to let Lonnie Hartung take over now. And she will be the moderator tonight, and then we'll have the candidates introduce themselves. Welcome, glad you're here.
Okay, rule number 1 is everybody turn off your cell phones. Just a reminder. We're here tonight to get to know the local candidates running for the 2 open seats on the Livingston City Commission. The candidates are up front. They are from left, Philip Bowers, Mel Friedman, Patricia Graybill, Jay Kiefer, Melissa Newts. And by the way, all candidates are seated alphabetically by last name. This election is by mail-in ballot only. I talked to the clerk recorder, and she told me that ballots were mailed out on Wednesday, October 16th, last Wednesday. If you or someone you know has not yet received his ballot, you can call the clerk recorder's office to check on why. Because occasionally ballots do get returned by the post office. If you need to register to vote or need to reactivate or update your voter registration, you can come into the office to do so. Ballots must be received in the clerk recorder's office by Tuesday, November 5th at 8 p.m. and they will be open till 8 p.m. Now the rules of the forum. To begin, each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce himself or herself. Candidates, you can use this time to tell us about your background, your position on the issues, why we should vote for you, and anything else you want us to know. After the self-introductions, questions from our audience will be addressed. There are several runners around the room, a couple of them. There's Bev and Shannon and Linda. If anybody needs some more papers and pencils, or if you have a question, just raise your hand, you get their attention, they'll come and grab the questions from you, and they will turn them into the back table here where our screeners are. The questions are screened to avoid duplication and at times to combine similar questions on the same subject. Questions meant to intimidate or attack individuals will be eliminated. Remember that your question may be directed to just one candidate or to all the candidates. Candidates will then have 1.5 minutes each to answer the question. Rebuttal answers will be limited to 30 seconds, 1 rebuttal per subject per person. And audience, if you feel a subject needs to be clarified, please feel free to submit a follow-up question, as many questions as you want to submit them. And candidates, there's a timer in the front row who will track you. As you near the end of your allotted time, she'll hold up a 15-second warning card and a stop card when your time is up. And I think everybody in the room will hear the buzzer go off. So audience, we ask you to please hold your applause until the end of the forum. Afterwards, we ask you to join us for refreshments, and you can possibly ask more questions of the candidates. So let's begin the self-introductions with candidate Philip Bowers. Philip, you have 2 minutes, please.
Good evening. My name's Philip Bowers. I'm a 5th generation Montanan, 2nd generation outfitter, Lone Wolf Guide Service. Been guiding full time since 1996. I'm married to Chelsea Bowers. I have 3 children. I have a daughter that's 21, a daughter that's 19, and a son that's 16. I attend the Livingston Christian Center, and I'm running to try and help Livingston, my hometown, maintain its uniqueness and small town feel while going through some growing pains.
Okay, Mel Friedman is the incumbent.
Yeah, I'm Mel Friedman. Married to my wife, Ellie, who's in the audience for 55 years. We have 3 kids, 1 in Boston, 1 in Florida, and 1 here, Lori Bishop. When we got married, I started in the contract janitorial service of large contracts, and started off as general manager. Ran an operation in Rochester, New York for a while. Then I was introduced to a gentleman in Indiana, Illinois area. He had a contract for State Farm Insurance in Bloomington, Illinois. He was in trouble a little bit and decided to take that job of cleaning 2 million square feet every night. They just built a 1.2 million square foot home office. And we traveled from there, and so I had some management problems, so we left there. Also, we were in Tornado Alley, and we didn't particularly like that. And started our own business in Virginia. And then I was introduced to a gentleman in Cleveland, Ohio, and they were in trouble in some accounts, so I went over there and I ran all the downtown high-rise buildings and dealt with the union. And then the big job I had in Cleveland, the last job I had before retiring was there's a NASA site outside of Cleveland, and the way the contract, I worked for a contract, we had 90 full-time people. It was about the size of MSU, which is the buildings and the grounds. And so most of my stuff was that way. I was born in Syracuse, New York, educated at Syracuse University with a business degree. Also took Army ROTC at school, and stayed with the reserve program for a while and got out as a major. And we were given a call by our daughter Lori to get out to Montana.
Thank you, sir.
We did that, and I'm very thankful. And she's the one that introduced me to the run for commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Patricia Grable.
I'm Patricia Grable. I have to apologize for my voice. I took a blood thinner and it wiped out my vocal cords. So I sort of sound like Minnie Mouse. Don't let that diminish my credibility. I'm a mother of 3 sons. I was married to CNN senior international correspondent Walter Rogers. Our first 2 children were born from that marriage. And then I was married and moved to Alaska for 20 years, married to a wildlife biologist. I have a master's degree in education. I've been a school principal and teacher. And I have, I'm retired. I got the Grable building back that my grandfather built here in Livingston in 1908. My family's been here 134 years. But the most important thing for me is that I grew up here as a child. And you know how children are, they fall in love with the people around them. So as a child, I learned to love the people of Livingston, and I never changed. I am here to and have been for 20 years fighting to keep Livingston an authentic community and not a suburb of Bozeman. And we are under siege, folks. At this point by Bozeman developers. I think that we can keep creative. Part of my background is in economics. And I have a strong background in urban planning. I've been at this since I was 22. Urban planning, public policy, and economics. And I think we can pull this off of keeping our town, Livingston, Montana, and not a suburb of Bozeman. And I've been working at it for 20 years, and I'm willing to continue working at it. Thank you.
Now, Jay Keeper.
Hello, my name is Jay Keeper. I grew up in Morehead, Minnesota, and I went to college at Morehead State College. Now it's a university. I guess the tuition goes up in your university. I studied mass communications with journalism and public relations. In 1976, my father worked for his father, who had a Chevrolet dealership in Morehead, and he went hunting in eastern Montana. He told my mother, if there's ever a dealership that's available in Montana, be prepared to move fast. And so in 76, there was an ad for Olson Motors, and they went out, they looked at it, and they came back and they said, we're moving to Montana. And I said, where? Livingston. So I went over to my friend's house and I said, well, we're moving to Montana. He said, where? I said, a town called Livingston. My friend's father was a truck driver with Consolidated Freight. He got up from the table and said, don't go. He said, I almost lost my life in that, a win. I don't think he'll survive. Well, I arrived in Livingston, July 1st, 1977. I've been involved in the community, with the Jaycees and the Elks. And I just love this community, and that's why I'm running. So I worked with my father at Timber Motors, where Yellowstone Imports is now. And the last 4 years, I've been working with the Yellowstone Gateway Museum, doing research and conducting the oral history of Park County. And it's been a blast. Thank you.
Thanks. Melissa Newts?
Hi. So first I want to thank AAUW for hosting this panel. Thank you. My husband and I moved to Montana about 13 years ago. We landed in Missoula, and that's where our first daughter was born. The cost of living went up, our rent went up. We ended up on WIC and food stamps, and we had a really hard time keeping our heads above water. So we were priced out. We moved. He took a job in Anaconda as the library director. So we were in Anaconda for a while. So our second daughter was born. And then a job opened up in Livingston, the library director. So he applied and got the job. That first year that he was working, we were effectively homeless. We lived in our camper, then we lived in a bunkhouse, in a horse barn in the valley, and then we lived in somebody's apartment off their garage. When it got warm enough, we moved back into a camper. And then we finally got a house a year later. So being priced out of a community you love and being without a home in a community you love are two things that are on my mind when I think about the challenges that people are going through right now in our town. And those are things that I have experienced myself. So that's what's on my mind as a commissioner. One of the many things, but one very big important thing. And yeah, I think I'll stop talking so we can leave more time for questions. So thank you again, AUW, for hosting this panel.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna start off big here. This is a question for all the candidates. What do you see as the biggest issues for the city? Philip, you want to start on that end and we'll move down the panel? What do you see as the biggest issues for the city?
Probably the housing, I would say, is a big one.
Is your microphone on?
Housing.
Yes.
That's it. I would say is a really big one.
Are you ready for us to pass on?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Friedman,
Biggest vision,
biggest issues for the city?
well, there's some exciting things coming up very shortly, which will involve the commission and the general public. One is going to be the growth policy, handled by a group that's what they do as their specialty. And that's the opportunity for the people in Livingston to step up. We also, one exciting thing has happened. I've been in the commission for 8 years. Up until recently, we never had a relationship with the MRL, the railroad. And right now they have a new president, and our city manager's been working with them pretty hot and heavy, and there's some good things that can come out of that. So that's one of the most exciting things. I yield.
I think the biggest issue that Livingston is facing right now is maintaining its identity. We have about $62.5 million in two proposals by the city, one of which is an $18.5 million underpass out by Printing for Less. I love Printing for Less. It's one of the most important businesses in our town, but we don't have to prove our love for Printing for Less by taxing everybody on the north side of town $30 a month for the next 20 years. And we don't have to tear down our wonderful civic center. So I think the biggest issue is this growth policy. Get rid of this strategic plan. Let's listen to what people actually want for their town. What is it we want Livingston to be in the next 20 years? I think that is just critical.
Go ahead, Jane.
I agree, that, housing is a concern, but, at the last couple commissions that I've, attended, when people bring up, Airbnbs and the proliferation of that, the only comment from the, chair of the commission is, we've had discussions on that. And nothing ever gets elaborated what those discussions have been or where is that discussion going. Another thing that it just happened last night, I had dinner with friends and they lived all over the country, but they're living here now. And they said, this is the only town that we've ever lived in where the city does not have an economic development part of the city structure. Why are they at opposite ends? Thank you.
Before you start my time, can I ask how you're handling rebuttals?
I'm handling rebuttals. A minute and a half to answer the question, 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
At the very end, after all 5 of us?
No, I think as people speak, and I think the rule is we do have one rebuttal per person per subject. So we don't want this constantly going back and forth.
Yes, we do want to hear your rebuttal.
Do you want me to do that first, or do you want me to give my own minute and a half answer? What?
You can give a rebuttal now and then do a minute and a half, as you see fit.
Okay, well, I have 2 people to respond to.
Okay.
Just clarifications and then my own statement. Thank you for
Sure.
clarifying too, because I wasn't sure.
This makes it harder for the timer, but.
Sure.
Okay, so
I will
before
use
we
the
move on-
time. I'm not gonna use all 30 seconds, so.
Okay, so it's 30 seconds.
So first I want to just respond to something Patricia said in regards to the strategic plan. I think it sounded like it was implied that it was not a community-driven document. It absolutely was subject to public meetings and was shaped and amended by community feedback. So that's just the first thing I want to say.
Okay, I'll start over.
Thank you. Yeah. The second thing is I want to respond to something that Jay said about Airbnbs or VRBOs, vacation rental by owner. So I get rid of acronyms. I'm on the planning board. That has come up. It has come up at the commission as well. We expect that topic to be discussed in the upcoming growth policy. That's all I want to say. Yeah. Okay. So top 3, the question was top 3, or no, just
What
top.
do you see as the biggest issues
Biggest
for the
issues.
city?
When you're ready, Priscilla. So I have been to over 1,000 doors in the city and talked to hundreds of residents, so I feel pretty good about this one. Housing, and when I say housing, I mean all sorts of topics from housing, from affordable to diversifying housing. Talk to folks that live in like a 5-bedroom home, their kids are grown, they don't need that big of a house, they want to downsize and they can't find something to downsize into. I've talked to new residents to town who just need like a 1-bedroom something and they can't find anything. I've heard from different nonprofits the need for transitional housing. Like when people are at a life stage change, whatever that means, depending on their own circumstances. So that's one topic, housing. I would say another one is the crossing. Folks on the north side want it finished. They're not talking so much about over versus under, they're just saying they want the project finished. That's based on the hundreds of people I've talked to. That's what the majority are saying. And I'd say the third thing that comes to mind would be communication. Improving communication between the city, the commissioners, and the community at large. So I think that's just an ongoing process that we're working to get better at. Everyone is working to get better at. And I also think part of that includes getting the correct information to citizens, the most accurate information on the topics that they care about.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, the next one is,
You have a rebuttal? Do I have a rebuttal?
yes.
Okay, just 30 seconds. Get you.
Okay, she's really good.
I worked on this the growth policy for Eagle River, Alaska for an entire year. There were 6 of us. And what happens is a strategic plan is a product of the city commission. So the goals set, I have the city manager, quotation from the city manager out in the hall, if you want to read it, but a strategic plan is simply not to be used when you are creating a growth policy. Thank you.
Any other rebuttals? Well, it's kind of along the same subject as far as communication. How will you find out what the citizens feel about issues, and what's the best way for constituents to communicate with you? Why don't we start with Mel this time and go,
Okay, why don't
Same
you
direction.
restate that again?
how will you find out what the citizens feel about issues? And what's the best way for constituent to communicate with you?
Well, I think we are the most transparent group. We have open meetings for the commission, for the public. We have an internet service. Everything is out there. There's no secrets. And we also, one of the most important things that we do during a year is a budget process, which is open to the public. And we have one of the finance officers in the state, Paige Federoff. We have a balanced budget with a reserve, and very proud of the type of work that we do with that. But we're transparent, and no closed doors, anything. We don't do anything behind any closed meetings. So I think the process runs very well.
Thank you. Patricia?
Okay, well, I'd like to say that 2,000 people signed a petition on Rodeo Parade, and those 2,000 signatures were ignored. 50 people emailed the city, and the commissioner said that because it was on Facebook, the source was Facebook, that they were to be ignored. The reality is that if that many people contact their commissioners and they get no response from the commissioners, they're not going to trust the process of communication. So I would like to go back to those 2,000 people and say, we're listening to you. And I would like to use the tools we have. There's nothing wrong with social media. There's nothing wrong with a phone call. There is nothing wrong with any kind of communication we can come up with, so that we genuinely hear people and they know it.
Melissa would like to rebut.
Right. So actually the commission we actually put it on the agenda to talk about the parade, even though it's not in our jurisdiction. So we put that on the agenda so that we can have a public conversation, because we can't just get up at the front of the room and talk about whatever we want, whenever we want. We have to publicly notice it. So we actually decided to put it on an agenda so we could have a public conversation. So we did hear the petition. I've never heard anybody make those remarks in a meeting about Facebook, so I'm not. But did you hold up the 15-second sign or the?
At 5 seconds.
Okay, that's okay. So I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Jay, you ready to answer the question?
Well, all commissioners have on the city's website their name, their phone number, and email. And I'm still going to have the same email, jaykier50@gmail.com. My phone number is still 222-3455. If they want to get hold of me, that's the best way. And I would think that just by them spending time just jotting a note, that's how I might feel what the true concerns are. Thank you.
Would you like to rebut, Mel?
Yeah, I don't know if people understand commission work. The first part of commission work is we have an agenda. We study everything, and then we meet as a group. And then it turns into we. And that process is being a good listener. You've got your thoughts on it, but you also want to hear the thoughts of the other commissioners. And listening to me is one of the key things that's got me through business and everything else. And I think that process works very well, but we do have a lot of homework to do, and we come here and take care of business.
Thank you. All right, Melissa? Or are we coming back to Phillips, sorry?
Melissa has
Melissa.
No, we have, let's let Melissa go. She did a rebuttal earlier. Now she wants her minute and a half to respond to the question. How will you find out what the citizens feel about issues? And what's the best way for a constituent to communicate with you?
So like I said, I've already been to over 1,000 doors in town and talked to hundreds of people. So that's one way, but not sustainable, right? Forever. I also answer the phone and text messages and just around town, emails. I listen to our boards and committees, which are also one avenue where the public brings information to the commission. Public meetings, people do bring petitions. I think I'm really easy to get a hold of, and our information is all online, and we respond. So,
Thank you. Philip?
Yeah, I think emails, phone calls, and sometimes you just gotta sit down and have a cup of coffee with somebody and figure it out. I'd like to have it where there was a certain time, whether it was once a month, once a week. I haven't figured that part completely out, but where you had a location that was available for whoever wanted to stop by and visit with you about whatever.
Melissa?
we have that. It's called a commission listening session. We have those. You can find out more on the city website or by looking at the agenda packets.
Patricia?
Can I have a 30-second about?
Yes.
Regarding the 2,000 signatures, this is where experience counts. I've been at this since I was 22. I've been a city commissioner and I have worked in cities pretty much all my life. The reality is when that 2,000 signatures came before the city commission in fact had jurisdiction and should have voted on it that night. And they didn't because the advice given was wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question sounds very personal, from an individual in the audience. Said, I live at the senior center. From the lobby, I watch traffic go from Main Street to 2nd Street. Many vehicles speed, rev their motors, plus there are many skateboarders and bicycles speeding along sidewalks, resulting in many close calls at intersections. This question is for all. How would you address that issue? Patricia?
Okay. I'm president of Downtown Building Owner and Business Association and have been for 12 years. And we brought in an expert, Dan Burton, who allowed us to get 100 more parking spots. Plus he can come back and do bicycle paths and using our parking lots correctly and the 325 houses along the way. And what we need to do is we need to utilize the kind of skill that we have, not relying just on our staff. We need to start bringing these people who are internationally famous for avoiding these kinds of things.
Jay?
Oh, I was sort of waiting. This summer, there was a boy that was killed right in front of the museum on his bicycle. And shortly after his death, somebody put up a turtle with a slow sign. But I saw a police car. I don't have a handheld radar gun, but it appeared to me that he was going over 30 miles an hour on his way past the museum. And if you look at the racetrack that we have here, the hairpin turn from Chinook up to Gallatin, and then 7th to Montana, and Montana all the way over. If the city wanted to basically fill some of the coffers that their dwindling budget, they could basically have people start issuing tickets with radar. The police have not been doing their job for you.
So downtown pedestrian safety is something that I remember there was pretty big conversations about it before I was a commissioner. I don't expect the person to come to me. If they want to, they can, whoever wrote this question, but I would like to at least let Becky maybe know, Becky Bird, who's the director of the senior center. There are some folks that are really engaging on downtown Main Street program, and also the growth policy would be another opportunity to express some of these important topics. I think that this is like some critical spaces where community members can directly connect with the groups that are taking action on things like this to help get some of these concerns addressed. Because if these groups don't know that this is an issue, then it might not get addressed. So it's really important to connect people with these kinds of concerns to the folks taking action on fixing problems. So Becky, you can expect me to, be in touch with you.
And Mel would like to read that.
When I first moved here, every street is different. Some are through streets, and I'm trying to say, if you drop down from Mars, to know the local rules, like the person on the right has the right of way. I think we've gotten a little better, like we've opened up some streets that are through streets. But honestly, again, when I drive here in the city, I slow down at the corners. And I don't take anything for granted. It's just the nature of what we are. If everything ran the same way, it would be okay. Some streets are not set up that way, so I just say slow down.
Thank you for that.
That's it.
And I think we come around to Philip again.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of enforcement downtown, period, from law enforcement and our parking. I mean, you can be in front of a business and it seems like somebody can be there almost all day. And the same, so if you don't have that level of awareness that somebody actually is watching, then it seems like it just people live on the fast side of things. So I think a little bit more enforcement. I know it, like in the budget and whatnot, that might mean we need to have a couple more officers, but if that means we need safety, I think safety is a priority.
Thank you. Mel, would you like to comment further? Your turn? No? Okay. This is we got around for this question.
Can I comment?
Yes.
Yes. So our city is already, we're understaffed. If you didn't know, now you know, we're understaffed. We have a hard time filling all the spots. One of them was an enforcement officer. So I think ideally everything would be staffed and everything would be enforced all the time, but I just want you to know that that's a current struggle in our community. Is just because we have job positions open doesn't necessarily we're able to fill them. It's housing. So.
Okay, so this one, we'll start with Jay. This is another question for all the candidates. Please state what part of town you live in and what particular issues you see in your neighborhood.
Could you repeat that question again?
Please state what part of town you live in and what particular issues you see in your neighborhood.
I live down on Geyser in Maine. The issues, I don't know what issue,
You see particular issues in your neighborhood. Apparently the last question, they saw issues in their specific neighborhood, and do you have any in yours?
I can't think of anything other than normal. That will rise to the occasion.
Nice neighborhood. Melissa?
I live on the north side and I live, between the two crossings. I live between the Fifth Street crossing and the underpass, not literally, but pretty close. So when both of them are backed up, I can't get out of my driveway. Cause the street's blocked off in both directions. So that's where I live. That's number one problem, I'd say. Number two problem, or maybe number one, it ranks right up there, is pedestrian safety. Crossing, there's only two places to cross easily, the underpass and the Fifth Street. And if you live on the north side, I don't need to explain to you what those pedestrian crossings are like in the winter because you know. But some of you don't live there, so I'll tell you. Fifth Street, sidewalk, often covered with snow and ice, hard for kids, hard for people who can't slog through snow this steep. Underpass, the city actually does clean that off and maintain it, but you know, it melts and it gets muddy from people driving through and splashing up and also plowing. Ice builds up on that, so it's kind of a constant struggle. So there's not a lot of great places to walk or bike in the winter. If you live on that side and you want to come across, it's very difficult and not always safe. So I'd say those are the two biggest issues in my neighborhood.
Philip? Oh, did you want to say something now?
We did have an issue other than Geyser in South Yellowstone. And I think one of the smart things that we've done, we got Halloween coming up and we closed South Yellowstone off. And prior to that, little kids at 8, 9 o'clock at night, crisscrossing the roads with traffic and everything. And from a safety issue, closing the road off has worked very well. I think some people were upset that we got all the traffic like that, but this worked well.
Philip, we'll hear from Philip.
Yeah, I live over on North End and right there by Caslin's. And the speeding up and down the street, because it's an incline, if someone doesn't live exactly where in between the block, then they come around and it's just like you just cut the brakes and head on down the thing. So back to that downtown issue, I know that there's positions that are open, but maybe we could make those more desirable so that we could have the enforcement that we need to keep things safe.
Thank you. Now, did you want, you have a minute and a half? No? Okay. Patricia?
I have, when I came to Livingston, I got back to the hotel. My grandfather built 1908 and restored it. And I've lived there for 20 years. So obviously, we have train sounds every night. And I've gotten to the point where I just don't even hear them. I kind of like them. I could hardly go to sleep without them. But we have also a lot of sirens because the downtown has become less and less populated by the people that actually live there, and we have a lot of activity in the night. My greatest concern is for the safety of people on bicycles throughout our downtown, and I will be working really hard this year to make sure that we have good marked bike paths, well designed throughout our downtown. Because I see a lot of potential accidents that could take place with bicyclists as they go by the Grable and other places, and I think that's a priority for me.
Lonnie, do you want to repeat the question again?
Yes. Please state what part of town you live in.
Oh, I think you already.
You did that,
Yeah,
yeah.
I got
You got that, the particular issues. So the next one on the subject of neighborhoods. This time we'll start with Melissa and work the other direction. How's that? For each candidate, how do you plan to deal with the lack of affordable housing? And second part of the question is, how do you plan to deal with the need for low income housing? Melissa, I bet you have something to say on this.
Only a minute and a half.
I think this is going to take, for dealing with housing, it's going to be something that's going to take all sorts of people from all across our community, not just the commission, to get at. But as a commissioner, one thing I think the commission can do is after the growth policy is updated, I think that's gonna be an informative document to look at our code and our building regulations and see how they can be updated. So I think that's probably the most basic. And then also some of the other ideas that get brought up, like accessory dwelling units, VRBOs, the vacation rentals. Looking at like diversity of housing and like housing density. Those are all things I expect might be fleshed out with the growth policy. Other than that, I think it's being a connector, and when opportunities arise, knowing who else in the community is working on what, so you can connect the right people to the right resources. I think that's a lot of what a commissioner does that you might not think about. So I think that's part of it also, is just being an active and engaged citizen. So I don't think there's gonna be anybody on a white horse coming to Livingston. Well, there might be somebody on a white horse in Livingston, but there won't be anybody like saving Livingston. I don't think we're gonna have a savior. I think we're gonna have to save ourselves, really, all of us. All of us.
Thank you. Jay, we're gonna move this direction this time. How do you plan to deal with the lack of affordable housing, and how do you plan to deal with the need for low-income housing?
Well, I've attended commissions and they've talked about, there's been a proposal up on the north side for development. There, in each time that a plan has come before the commission, they defeated it. And I've had people that live up in that area and they say, I don't want to see any development up there until the city comes first and comes with an alternate access for the traffic. If they're going to be going up there, they've got to give us an out. And so far they haven't. They've invested so much money in they're wedded to this idea of an underpass that have them come up with another idea as far as an overpass on their, oh boy, we invested so much time and energy for the underpass. I hate to say that I was wrong, but this might be the time.
And Melissa would like to
Yeah.
that to them.
So Jay said something about everything on the north side that commission votes against. I just want to say, when I was first on the commission, HRDC asked for a variance for some low income housing on the north side, and we approved that. So it's a project that's underway specifically for low income that we approved.
Thank you. Patricia?
Rebuttal. Okay,
somebody has
let's just say, I mean, most every project for the north side of the hill has been, for development in housing, has been defeated by the commission. And I'm glad that they did, because there is no alternate access. Thank you.
Patricia?
I'd like to ditto what Jay said.
Is this rebuttal or I've lost?
Okay, I'm talking.
You're in your minute and a half. You're gonna- okay. Thank you, Patricia. I just want to give you the amount of time that it's like to. Okay.
I wish I worked on it, because that's something that's very dear to me. To have an affordable overpass coming out of Northern Lights Boulevard rather than the $17.5 million underpass project that will hurt people on the north side of town, and they will still be stuck at Fifth Street. So I have absolutely no support at all for that 17.5 million. But the other thing that I've been involved in planning all my life as well. And we should have had what's called a planned unit development years ago as part of what we are planning, so that we plan for low-income housing. I've also been a low-income or affordable housing renter for the last 20 years. And I will say this, and I've had one of those Airbnbs, 3 of them of the 15 apartments in the Grable building. And I will say it's a seasonal issue primarily. So understanding what brought us to this point, which I can write up for you, it's a whole complex transition from 1986 when we changed our economy to tourism. And for 3 months of the year, we have a really serious housing problem. I have a hard time renting the Airbnbs in the wintertime, frankly. but they're easy to rent for the summer. So it's a seasonal thing as well. So that should be taken into consideration.
Now, the subject again is how to deal with the lack of affordable housing and the need for low-income housing.
And I've
You have a
been
minute and a half.
providing that for 10 years, or 20 years now, low-income housing.
Did you want to take your minute and a half now?
Yeah, this is a worldwide problem, so we're faced with it, no matter where you go, is that conversation. I had a conversation with a local manager here of a large operation, and he's got a couple of sons who graduated college, and I love Livingston, but putting a job together and a place to live for single people, is pretty difficult. We've got the old hospital coming on, that's one possibility. We've talked to builders that were supposed to be putting affordable housing on the north side. And I don't know where that sits now, but we did pass that. But this is a problem not only for Livingston, but all over. And now there's two things that I'm hearing of. One is affordable housing and also getting across the railroad tracks. There's two separate issues there. We used to live on the north side, and now we moved down further. And at 6 in the morning, I guarantee you will not stop by anything. But I work at Counterpoint, and I get there at 6 in the morning, and I go across Fifth Street. It takes me 5 minutes, and I come back at 9 o'clock, and it takes me 5 minutes. Somewhere in between is the problem. So.
Thank you. Philip?
I don't think there's any real quick fix on this. And between developers and residents, at some point, there's gonna have to be some compromise. It's never gonna be the perfect situation.
Thank you. Okay, this question here, we'll start with Jay, and move in that direction, loop around. And I'm gonna remind everybody of the rules that we handed out to the candidates. Rebuttal answers will be allowed, but when giving a rebuttal answer, candidates should only address that one topic, and each rebuttal will be limited to 30 seconds with one rebuttal per candidate per question. So we'll clarify that before we come to this big one here. Okay, it's kind of like two questions together, or two comments together. Considering that we have had 15 years of public comment regarding a railroad crossing, and the fact that there's no possibility of coming to a consensus, how do you plan on getting this project done? And the second comment is, when it comes to an overpass being more economical, as well as the railroad does not want another underpass, are you willing to work towards our getting the overpass soon? Again, how do you plan on getting the overpass project done? And are you willing to work to getting this done soon? Jay?
Well, I believe there is a study currently underway, and I thought part of the task was as far as an alternate crossing, that I don't know if that's going to be part of the growth policy that's going to be presented before the final commission. But the overpass could result in a bit more money, but you're not going to be having the legal bills that you're going to be fighting with voyages on there that Mr. Meese thought, well, the second underpass will be a piece of cake on there. And I thought, how are you going to basically violate the laws of physics with water? This just makes more sense. You never would have to worry about an alternate traffic as far as the ambulances not be waiting for fifth in the railroad. Although they can go over the underpass. It just seems to be a win-win.
Thank you. Okay. Melissa, you'd like to
Yeah,
rebut this one?
yeah, there's something he said, yeah. Okay. There's not currently a study underway. There was a grant that the city partnered with MRL to apply for, and it's for planning. Not a study, but a planning document. You have to have a planning document before you can have construction. So just to clarify that there's not currently a study underway. Thank you.
Patricia, do you have anything to say on this?
Just a little. I've been advocating for an entire year on social media and every place I can find for an overpass. I think it can be done in about, the estimates are about $8 million with the possibility of $4 million covered. We've already spent $2.4 million studying underpass, and now we have another $930,000, and it does not include underpass. If you look at the proposal that's going to be going before MRL. So the overpass wipes out our watershed, it wipes out our view shed, it wipes out the Voyage Reg, the proposal itself does. And I'm saying, come out of Northern Lights Boulevard, have an overpass. It will not affect the view, it will not affect the water. It can be done in 18 months, and it could cost us as little as $4 million. That doesn't seem like rocket science to me. So yes, I would be very interested. Burlington Northern is not interested in underpasses, by the way. So I'm just really supportive of an overpass. And soon, please, let's just have people say, maybe I made a mistake. Let's take a look at this other option.
Mel, would you like to rebut, or do you want to start your
I
comment?
still think with the meetings that we're going to have on the growth policy and the relationship that we have with MRL, and some studies are going on right now, I think coming out of that, we'll have a little more choice. Now, when I first started the commission, most of the stuff was already planned as far as the underpass. I didn't particularly like where that underpass was going to come out, whether it was a prudent way to do it. But we also looked at the overpass, and they were pretty equal in price. The overpasses that we looked at was a little more expensive. But I think after we have a full thing with the growth policy and some other things that we've got in the fire, we'll have a little clearer picture and to solve this. So it's coming down the road.
Philip?
I don't know how long you need to study this to figure it out, because it ain't rocket surgery. It's like you can get, and I haven't been in the trenches on this thing, but I mean, roll your sleeves up, go to work, and let's get this done. It can't be that hard.
Thank you. Melissa, you get a minute and a half?
Can you repeat the question? Just before I do, thanks.
How do you plan on getting the railroad project done? And are you willing to work towards getting the overpass soon?
So the commission is making forward progress. First thing people talk about to me is they don't care about over versus under. Second thing is who's going to pay for it, how much does it cost? So the grant opportunity is a chance to get the costs down. And this winter we'll find out if we got accepted, if we got the grant for planning. And if we got the grant for planning, it's $940,000 grant money plus a $500,000 match. So that's a good chunk of change. If we get that grant, we will qualify potentially to apply for construction grant, which will be more money, which is great to get the costs down. I haven't seen the data that show over versus under and cost estimates. I think that an important part of the planning grant is looking at the design and what's possible based on the geography and topography of the area. And that will help determine, because it isn't as simple as just putting an overpass. There's like roads that have to be raised or lowered. It's not as complicated. It's not as simple as like a Lego set. You have to like adjust some things when you connect roads with each other. And it's expensive anywhere. It's going to be expensive because infrastructure is really expensive. So I think the studies are great. We have studies. Next step is getting the engineers to use that data to tell us what makes the most sense based on our land and how much money things cost. So I think data, facts, science will help drive the.
May I have a rebuttal?
Yes, Jay.
Melissa said that we won't know until sometime in the future if we're gonna get the grant. My question would be is, hasn't the city manager tasked his person for grant writing as far as to being on a lookout for grants that address this proposal. I've yet to hear of his quest for funding, alternate funding to solve our problem.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for, have you read it yet? No. Okay, I do have a question for you then, specifically. Okay, go ahead. Get your rebuttal in.
Okay, the study includes the underpass only and the $17.5 million proposal, folks, number one. Number two, the study that was done before for the overpass was over at Fleischman Creek. The one that's being proposed is coming out Northern Lights Boulevard. All that has to happen is that Highway 10 has to be raised 15 feet, and it does not interfere at all with the view shed. So it's so much less expensive.
Thank you, Tricia. Like I said, there's one question directly for you, and this is it. You're quoting numbers related to building an overpass. Where are you getting them from?
I'm getting them from a personal contract with an engineer to do the cost estimates. So I hired someone to just give me a preliminary figures.
Okay, I hope that answers the individual's question. Okay, the next one is, and let's start with Patricia and keep going in that direction back again. How do you plan to incorporate open space and trails into Livingston's growth and development?
That's a subject that's very dear to my heart. I would love to see Livingston completely interconnected with trails and alternative transportation. And I'm working with the committee on that. But I also have proposed something like the Bozeman Trail on the northern side of town. And I think we could have eliminated the death of this young man if we had implemented that years ago. I will continue to work on the planning, both for the connectivity of alternative transportation here in town. It's something very important to me.
Thank you. Now?
Well, we have a Parks and Trails group that meets. I think we've got, and we just opened one in the O Street. And I think it's a big part of the community that we do, but I think we do pretty well in that area. So really, I don't have any other comment other than that.
Thank you. Philip, again, how do you plan to incorporate open space and trails into Livingston's growth and development?
Trails cost money. We have some trails. I'm not saying that we don't need more trails, but let's use some funds to get this overpass in, and then we can start looking at trails and other issues. But I think we need to use some of the funds that we might put somewhere else and focus on the needs that we have at hand.
Thank you. Melissa?
This is a great question. So are you ready for some?
Yeah.
So, I'm on the planning board, and on the planning board, when you look at subdivision reviews, there's something called parkland dedication. So there's actually requirements in place for developers to make certain percentages or parts of their development parks. Or there's these like complicated ways they can waive it, but then that has to be worked out. And it doesn't mean that there's no open space. It means there's sort of like swapping or figuring out alternatives. And it gets in the weeds really quickly. But that's one really great thing. So I would expect with our growth policy, there could be some interesting things that surface with that topic. Also, we have a fantastic Parks and Trails committee. I mean, they're like amazing. They are totally amazing. And I think that there's some really great plans, strategic plans and like long-term like community vision documents. You can find it all online, I'm sure, in the Parks and Trails little tab of the website. But there's like long-term plans to get things better connected, the trails that already exist to make Livingston more connected. And with future developments, thinking about where can we extend trails and have developers help do that as part of the development to continue our trail system. So I think those things are in the works. And it's a lot of community support for these ideas to keep it going forward and to better connect the things that already exist. Yeah. Mhm.
Jay?
I would tend to echo Philip's sentiment. I think more of our energy and money should be looking at an access for people to get into town from another part of town, rather than worry about, I've been to the commission meetings and I've heard extensive reports on the Trails Committee, and they've been doing a wonderful work. But and I just compliment them for the work. And that's about it. Thank you.
This question is for Mel as an incumbent. You might, or it's for everyone. We'll start with Mel. As an incumbent, you may know the answer. Does the city have an urban decay law? If so, why is it not enforced? Does the city have an urban decay law? And if so, why is it not enforced? Is there an urban decay law within the city? Urban decay.
Urban decay.
There is no ordinance.
Urban decay.
Do we have urban decay?
Do we? Well, I'm sure every neighbor thinks his neighbor. Contributes to urban decay. Is there anything on the books? Not that you know of? Okay, that's why it's not enforced.
Yeah, I don't quite understand which way you're coming at, but,
Okay. Is there an urban decay law within the city? We don't, not that you know of.
Are you asking everyone this? or-
Yes, I'll ask everyone. We'll start with Philip or Mel because he is incumbent, so. Philip, do you know, does the city have an urban decay law? If so, why is it not enforced?
I'd have to get back to you on that one. And then if it was, then it probably falls back to why we have speeders, too many people parking downtown, and we don't have enough people to fill the enforcement.
Thank you, fair enough. Fair enough. Melissa?
So this is an interesting question. I can't remember what it's called, but I think there's something, and I don't remember the language right now.
It's called pollution. It is a pollution ordinance.
I can't remember what it's called, but there's something, so I remember actually, I remember meeting with somebody about this. So, and I think part of the problem is how you define it. So it had something, and this is me, just going off of my memory, so it might be imperfect, but, I think that it has to do with how you define it. So some of these things I think could be tightened up. One of the things that's coming up actually in an upcoming commission meeting on November 5th is forms of government, and charter form of government is one that we're going to be talking about, or one that Dan Clark will be talking about. And I think that there are some ways to change the language if we went to a charter form of government that could tighten up some of these ordinances and make them easier to enforce. And I think, if memory serves me correctly, that this is one of the topics that sort of fell into this category. It's like hard to define because, like you said, what's one person's decay is somebody else's very expensive collectible item. So there's some like, there was some. It's one of those areas that isn't always crystal clear. But there was conversations about how do we clarify it and tighten it up so that people of Livingston can get what they expect and want from their city.
Now, did you want to
no, can they give an example of what they're talking about?
of urban decay? An
Yeah, I mean,
example?
I just,
A motorhome that's been sitting in their yard for about 35 years.
I mean, like
No, I think
Melissa
he's right. I
says
think it's like
it's-
a motorhome sitting in the yard is like an
it's subjective. It could be subjective. Jay, do you have a comment?
I had a friend that, picked me up about 70 years ago. After I had my hip replaced, he lifted me up, he put me in his truck, he said, "We're gonna go on a ride." And usually when I go, I carry a tablet with me and a pen. And so he took me to these neighborhoods and we saw cars on the front lawn, we saw couches, it looked like a furniture mart. And then there were lawns that had not been mowed in a very long time. And so I came to a commission meeting and during the open comment, and I said, "Do we have this?" He said, "Yes, the building and planning, it's under theirs division. All you have to do is write down the addresses and give it to them, and they'll cite them." So without the tablet, I had to retrace my steps, and I had to. So I wrote down, put what there was a house, a refrigerator, two nice sofas, ready for pickup. Where they were, and I never did get a phone call from the city department on there. So that shows that your initiative is not always paid off by city staff.
Now, did you have a comment?
Yeah, one area, we have a lot of absentee, houses of owners that don't live there. And, for instance, on our street we have that, so I haven't seen the owner for several years. Bozeman just passed, especially with the snow coming on in the wintertime. If someone doesn't remove the snow and it gets reported to the city gets a contractor to remove the snow, and then they bill the owner of the house on his taxes. Not just a separate thing, but on the taxes. And that seems like a pretty darn good way to get somebody's attention. It is important that we do take due diligence in that. But I think that's something in the future that we could look at. And as you don't want to, especially if it's a neighbor, you don't want to get them in trouble. But I think if this way, either it's done or it's not, and somebody inspects their property, go ahead and do it, and then bill the owner of that directly, and I think that would really solve a lot of problems.
Rebuttal?
Jay?
On there, I had a conversation with Mr. Woodall, and he said, "Well, Jay, on there, if we have to mow the lawn or if we have to do this, on there, it'll go on there, it'll just raise their property taxes." And he said, and some of these homes are being foreclosed on there, and well, what are we supposed to do? And I said, "You know what, that's not my problem. I just was told to give you the address and to cite them."
Thank you. Patricia?
Yes, first of all, I kind of love to read, so I'm the person. No, I'm
This is her comment.
This is it. Okay.
From here.
And so I'm one of those people who does your homework and reads everything. So when I was on the city commission, I read every ordinance that was on the books before I became once I was elected. And I never saw an urban decay law on the books. However, the closest thing we have to it is I advocated for the Urban Renewal Agency. And that, one of the things we had to come up with was blight in the downtown area in order to qualify for the urban renewal monies, which, by the way, has one of the reasons we have such a beautiful downtown, and we actually have our sidewalks, because urban renewal monies have actually paid for half the sidewalks and then loaned the money to the owners for the other half the sidewalks. By the way, Grable cost us $50,000 to do the sidewalks in front of the Grable building. So the closest thing we have is just the definition of blight in the downtown. However, it's something worth looking into in light of what people are saying.
Okay. Let's start this line of questioning with Philip. It goes to everybody, and we'll just come down the road here. Philip, do you oppose change to the civic center zoning and infrastructure based on tradition? Do you oppose change to the civic center zoning and infrastructure?
Yeah, I'm opposed to things that's gonna take away from the historical aspect of our community and our downtown. What's the other part of that?
Civic center zoning and infrastructure.
And the infrastructure, I think, is, I guess, there's probably a little gray area there. I mean, what they just got done doing over the last 2 summers for our downtown and concerning the infrastructure really dressed it up. So I think there's some gray area there probably, but I mean, if it's done right, it sure dresses it up.
Thank you. Mel, would you like to answer this?
And they want to know about the civic center as far as,
Do you oppose change to the civic center zoning and infrastructure?
we badly need, we no longer can use the outdoor pool. And we badly need, another way to look at things. And I think when I grew up in upstate New York, we had YMCA's, YMHA's, we had all these facilities, they all had pools. And I think we need an indoor facility, which would be for therapeutic use for older people, younger people. But we definitely got to think in those terms. The cost of pools is tremendous, indoor, outdoor, but we can't afford to run the outdoor pool anymore. So I think we have to start looking along those lines. I think it's a good location, and it's something that will be taken up in a short while as far as the cost goes. So, but I like the idea that we do have a health center of some sort.
Thank you. Patricia?
I am completely opposed to doing anything with our civic center. You know, it's almost like love. I was sitting across from a young man whom I said it mattered to me. It was to me such a beautiful building as a child. And when I looked out and I saw the civic center and the band shell and the bridge, it brought this wonderful sense of Sacagawea Park. And the proposal in the committee actually has 3 members, 3 city employees, Lisa Lowry, Mike Cardos, Don Babcox, and 2 citizens, Kristen Galbraith and Dr. Coleman. And those are the only people who are making the decision whether or not to tear our civic center down and build a $44 million wellness facility on a landfill with the Yellowstone River 6 feet below. Those 5 people are making this decision to bring it to us for. I don't think that's fair. And the civic center matters to me. I love it. The young man I was talking to doesn't love me. He doesn't care that it hurts that would go, but it matters to me, and I will do whatever I can to have a very good, and have been on the pool committee, to have 2 swimming pools and a track and everything people want for significantly less money, powered by solar that could heat the high school and not destroy our beautiful civic center.
Thank you.
Unnecessary.
Jay?
No, I don't oppose change to the civic center, but I was at a meeting when they had this grand plan from the city hired architect regarding possible alternatives. And when it came time for the question and answers, it was Patricia that asked the question on there. When they looked at the 3 options on there for the pools, and sometimes it was various pools on their cold, family, a warmer temperature for therapeutic. Patricia said on there, did you ever consider talking to the hospital and to the high school, because they would have been partners? And Mr. Cardos had to say, no, we didn't even think about them on there. It just tells me that there's people that are, some of the people that are in leadership in the committee that are responsible for making decisions really don't think outside the box. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa?
So the question was, am I opposed to changing infrastructure, civic center zoning based on tradition? basically?
Yes.
Right. So, I was part of the commission that voted to have a feasibility study done. We were in favor of a feasibility study for a pool / wellness center, based on community input that the community wanted some things changed and some new things for our community. So that's what we supported. I support public process. I was really happy to hear that hundreds of people responded to this survey about the wellness center. And I also just want to share that there's actually, it's not just a city or commission driven project. There's actually 5 partners looking at the wellness study. The city, the county, the schools, Livingston Healthcare, sorry, and AMB West. So it's community driven, also various partners in the community driven. And so it's not so much what I'm opposed to. What I'm in favor of is I'm in favor of Livingston coming up with what's best for Livingston. I'm a huge fan of that. So I'm really happy to see that there's been a lot of public input and like a lot of engaging community conversations about this topic. And nothing's set in stone yet. And you can get on the city website to see what the most recent documents are that folks are talking about here.
Thank you. Okay, the next subject has to do with snow removal, which is a very serious issue which we experienced last year. Snow removal creates hazards for pedestrians, and that causes damage in some cases. What will be done to better move heavy snow in the future? And who should we complain to if there is damage? Mel, can you start with this, answering this question?
Wow. As I said before, I was in charge of a NASA site where we did the buildings and the grounds, and when you get a lot of snow, you've got to move it somewhere, and then you got to deal with the stuff that you move somewhere, and that's a very costly thing. And then to begin with, when you get a lot of it, you have a lot of overtime for city work, and it's a real hodgepodge. It's a difficult question. I think we do pretty well with it, but when you get one after another of large storms, you're really in trouble, and it's very costly. So I don't know if there's a real good answer for it. But the cost of it is tremendous, and that's a big problem. But you got to move it someplace, and you got to remove that, and that's a cost. So it's a tough issue. They do a pretty good job. You know, they might put it in the center lane downtown or something like that. But the question, what you do with it, it's not an easy. When you get involved in it, it's not that easy a deal, but tough.
Thank you. Patricia?
Thanks for the question, whoever asked it. About several years ago, I started thinking about that. And I realized that snow removal is only like 6 or 7 times a year that you really have to remove all the snow that threatens people's neighborhoods and so forth. And then I took a look at the cost of the equipment that the city had bought just to remove the snow. It was like $700,000 for some of it. Seemed like that was a lot of money to invest on something you don't use that often. Plus you have to bring up the personnel just for that. So I started looking around the country as to which places in the United States do an effective job of snow removal. And most interestingly was New York City and New York State. And what they did was they quit having public snow removal. So they didn't have to buy the equipment. And then they would have contractors that they hired when there was a snowfall those contractors came in, cleaned out the snow, and paid for the equipment to do it. So they carried all the long-term payments on this equipment. So it seems to me like really following the New York City model is a really good idea, because if the contractors don't do the job, then they lose the contract. And it actually turns out considerably cheaper for Livingston to do something like that. So it's something I've been proposing.
Jay, snow removal.
Snow removal. Bill said that it costs a lot, and where are you gonna put this, all this stuff? Well, you could probably have a discussion with the county. I don't know what, I don't think the rodeo arena is free, and they've got gates that open up fairly wide. I think all that snow could fit in there fairly well. By the time spring comes, it will be gone. This Patricia's exploration of New York City about having contracted out, that seems to be like, what took us so long to come up with this idea? I hope this gets put on the discussion plate before the commission in the near future.
Thank you, Jay. Melissa?
So, this gets at our form of government and the city commission, city manager form of government. So our city commission is a policy-making body. We do not, manage city staff. So when it comes to how will snow be removed, that would be Public Works. And I'm assuming, Michael Carter is the city manager, obviously he would know about all of the different departments. However, snow is something that just came up at the last commission meeting, actually. Our Chair Hoagland, Darrell Hoagland, brought up snow and in the context of policy. And is there something we can do with our policy before the snow starts falling in great quantities to make sure that, like sidewalks, for example, would be something that could be cleaned off, because we still have pedestrians year round. It doesn't matter if it snows or not. And it's a safety issue. So that's going to be coming up on a future agenda. You can just watch the agenda packets to see when that comes up. That doesn't address the quantity of snow on streets. But again, that's not really a commission topic. That's a Public Works topic. So if you have complaints, one of the questions was, who do you take your complaints to, right?
Yes.
Well, if there's a large snow event, I would not expect Shannon Holmes to be answering the phone, because he's the Public Works Director and he'll be dealing with things like broken pipes around town or whatever else. I would take it to Michael Cardus, the city manager. His information's online, and he also has an open door policy. So if he's around, you can just ask him, call him up or ask him, and he'll answer your question.
Thank you. Now, would you like to comment?
Yeah, it was nice when I had the NASA contract, because we could pass the cost of our people onto NASA. And then if I had to call a contractor to haul the snow away, we could pass that cost on. So that worked very well. But you can imagine the numbers. But this is the other part of it. Yes, you have to have other people involved. Tough issue, cost.
Thank you. And Philip?
Well, I guess whether you use a contractor or you do it yourself, you have to budget for it. You live in a snow area, so it's gonna happen sooner or later, and it might be more than one time a year. There's other areas around us, Cody, Jackson, West Yellowstone, where we sit on the other side of it. They do a fantastic job from what I've seen when I've been in those areas. So I think you just have to budget for it. And if it is the case that you need to get a hold of the city manager to ask that question of why or when it's going to happen, I think you have to back up. I thought that the commission was the boss, and then the second in command, and then it went on down the trickle thing. So I think it starts with the commission, because they're the boss.
Rebuttal?
Yes, Jay.
I'm glad that Melissa brought up the form of government, that the commission does not make that decision. But there's an alternative on there. There is a petition that's being circulated around town on there that would change the format of the governing this city from a commission to, city manager to a commission mayor, because the mayor would have to be elected and stand for election. Currently, right now, the only person.
Thank you, Jay. As a matter of fact, that's one of the questions that would have been next, but we have a pile of questions here that unfortunately we don't have time to answer, but I would like to give each candidate 1 minute in closing comments to wrap up, conclude, and tell us why we should vote for you. So let's start with Philip. So we move down this way. You have 1 minute, Philip.
I think got a good reason why you should vote for me. I'm probably a little rough around the edges, but I'm willing to roll my sleeves up, figure out what's going on, why things don't happen a certain way, and sit down with people, have a conversation, and see if we can't compromise and work through some things, and not forget about our tradition, and not forget about where our values are in this little local community. Thanks.
Thank you. Now,
I still go back to my original statement, as far as commission work goes. We do get the information and we study it, and then we meet as a group as a commission, and that's where the ideas flow, and the process works when you got people that work together. And but there's a lot of study involved before we get to that point, and then when we get to talk, so you have to be a good listener and come up with solutions.
thank you, Mel. I think your minute is up.
No,
No, that wasn't.
sorry, I was ready. He's got 20
I
minutes.
interrupted
I'm sorry.
I interrupted you.
I'm just doing a great job. I was ready for the Patricia's. So then you can be setting the thing. Should we go back to the 30 seconds? I think it's where.
1 minute, 1 minute.
A whole minute.
He is
If
at
anyone-
this time only. Would you like to comment further?
Okay,
Mel?
yeah, yeah, you got interrupted, and would you like to continue the 30 seconds?
It's okay, yeah.
It's okay, okay, so,
Apologize.
okay, now I'll clear this thing and, so, okay. I'm ready for Patricia.
Just kidding. Okay, first of all, I've got some yellow cards out in the hall. And so just pick up a card. It's got my phone number, it's got my email, just get a hold of me. I'm really interested in any concern you have, anything you have to say. I would love your vote for me this time. And part of the reason is I bring experience. I bring a massive knowledge to this, and I want so much for this town to flourish in the net as we face the challenges we're facing right now. And I think I can be helpful, and that's my purpose in running for office.
Thank you. Jay?
A friend of mine called me up at the house and said, Jay, I've read your letters and you're yelling from the cheap seats. If you want to do something, spend some money and file. And I went down and I looked at the filing fee and I said, I've lost more money in Powerball tickets. This sounds like a pretty good deal to me. I'm not from Livingston. I came to Livingston, and Livingston is my home. Some people were fortunate enough to be born here. I'm fortunate to feel that I arrived. And I really love this community, and I want to work in making it a great community. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Melissa?
So I'm a sixth generation Nebraskan. I was raised in the county where my dad's side of the family first homesteaded. It's where I lived since I was just a few months old, and until I moved out of my parents' home. When I go back to that town now that I lived outside of, I don't recognize it. The school's gone. There's no grocery store anymore. The post office moved into one of those metal buildings. There's no gas station anymore. There's still the lumberyard because the kid I graduated high school with got it from his dad and still runs it. That's all that's left. I would like for my children, if they choose to stay in Livingston, to recognize the town where they grew up as adults.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wanted to thank our candidates for coming out tonight. And I want to thank our candidates for the dedication that they put into running for office. I really appreciate it. It takes a lot of effort and we appreciate it as a community. So thank you very much, candidates. Looking forward to voting. The ballots went out. The mail-in ballots went out. Hopefully you got your ballots by now. And so you can vote and before the first Tuesday in November. And I also just want to pass on, we did stream this meeting. So if it'll be on our city webpage. So if anybody has neighbors or friends that are interested in looking at it, you can review, go over and look at it again, and it'll help anyone who wasn't able to be here tonight and is interested in hearing what the candidates said. It's at the City of Livingston website. So thank you all for coming out. We appreciate it very much. Thank our candidates very much. Thank Lonnie for being the moderator. It was great. Join us for some cookies in the back, and thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Stay around.